There is something strangely comforting about windows at night. They separate you from the outside world while still allowing you to see it. A quiet street, distant lights, shadows moving gently in the dark. Most of the time, you look through a window without thinking twice about it. But every now and then, there comes a moment when it feels like something on the other side is looking back. Amara Collins had always liked keeping her window open at night, not physically open, but uncovered, with the curtains drawn back so she could see the city outside. She lived on the 12th floor of an apartment building, high enough to feel removed from the noise below, but not so high that the world felt distant. At night, the view was calm, rows of dim streetlights, the occasional passing car, and the quiet glow of other windows scattered across nearby buildings. It had always been a source of comfort, until one night it wasn't. It started as a small detail, something easy to overlook. Amara was sitting on her bed, scrolling through her phone, when her eyes drifted toward the window. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The same buildings, the same lights, the same stillness she had seen every night. But then she noticed something that made her pause. One of the windows in the building across from hers was completely dark. That alone wasn't strange. People turned their lights off all the time. But what caught her attention was the position of the window. It was directly across from hers, aligned in a way that felt too exact, too centered. She stared at it for a moment longer than necessary, then looked away, brushing off the feeling as nothing more than coincidence. But when she looked back, something had changed. There was a faint shape in the darkness. At first she thought it might be a reflection, something from her own room appearing faintly on the glass. But the more she looked at it, the more certain she became that it wasn't a reflection at all. It was inside the other window, standing still, watching. Amara sat up slowly, her attention fixed on the shape. It didn't move, it didn't shift. It was just there, barely visible against the darkness, but clear enough to make out the outline of something that resembled a person. Her first instinct was to rationalize it. Maybe it was someone standing in their apartment with the lights off. Maybe they hadn't noticed her. Maybe it was just a trick of light and shadow. But none of those explanations felt right, because the figure was facing directly toward her. She didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, the window across from hers looked completely normal. There was no sign of the figure, no indication that anything unusual had been there at all. The curtains in that apartment were slightly open now, revealing an empty room inside. Amara told herself it had been nothing, just a shadow, a reflection, a moment of imagination brought on by the quiet of the night. But that night, it happened again. She found herself glancing toward the window more often, almost without realizing it. And when she finally looked directly at it, her breath caught slightly. The window across from hers was dark again, and the figure was back. This time, it was clearer, still standing in the same position, still facing her. Amara felt a slow, creeping unease settle over her. She stood up, taking a cautious step closer to her own window. The figure didn't react. It remained completely still, as though it had been placed there, frozen in that exact position. She raised her hand slightly, an unconscious gesture, as if testing whether it would respond. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the figure raised its hand too. Amara froze. Her hand dropped instantly, her pulse quickening as she stepped back. That was not a coincidence. That was not a reflection. That was something responding to her. But something about it felt wrong. The movement had been just slightly delayed, just slightly off. From that night forward, the window became something she could no longer ignore. Every evening, as darkness settled in, she felt drawn to it, even when she tried not to look. And every time she did, the figure was there, watching, waiting, mimicking. If she shifted her position, it would eventually do the same. If she stood still, it remained still. But the timing was never perfect. There was always a delay, a subtle hesitation that made it feel less like a reflection and more like something trying to imitate one. Amara started closing her curtains earlier each night, trying to block out the view completely. But even with the curtains drawn, she couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still there, standing in that dark window, facing her, watching. One night, she decided to test something. Instead of turning on the lights in her room, she sat in complete darkness, just like the figure across from her. She waited for her eyes to adjust, then slowly looked toward the window. At first, she couldn't see anything. Then, gradually, the outline appeared again. But this time, it was different. The figure was closer. Not physically closer in space, but clearer, more defined, as though the distance between them had somehow lessened. Amara didn't move. Neither did the figure. For a long moment, they remained like that, two silhouettes in the dark, facing each other across the empty space between buildings. Then, slowly, the figure leaned forward, closer to the glass, and this time, there was no delay. Amara's breath caught as she instinctively leaned back, her heart pounding. Something had changed. The pattern was broken. The distance that once felt safe no longer existed. And then she noticed something that made her stomach tighten. The reflection in her own window was no longer matching her movements. She turned her head slightly. But the reflection didn't. It stayed facing forward, toward the other window, toward the figure. The realization came slowly, but once it did, it was impossible to ignore. The figure across from her wasn't watching her directly. It was watching her through the glass, through the reflection, through something that connected both windows in a way she couldn't understand. That night, Amara closed her curtains and didn't open them again. Days passed, then weeks. She avoided looking at the window entirely, keeping the curtains shut at all times. Eventually, the fear began to fade, replaced by a cautious sense of normalcy. Nothing else happened. No sounds, no movement, no sign of the figure. Until one night, she forgot. Just for a moment, she pulled the curtain aside and looked. The window across from hers was empty. No darkness, no figure, nothing. Amara exhaled slowly, a small sense of relief settling in as she stared at the now normal view. Then she turned away and froze, because in the reflection of her own window, standing behind her, was the figure, no longer across the distance, no longer separated by glass, but inside her room, watching.
It's Mythic Murmurs.